agreeing to do this, for joining us on
Sure.
Discord. You were you were like by our consensus demanded to be the next big thinker to join us in the conversation, and we wanted to conduct an interview about your work and your philosophy. And I'm sure that Stephen, or Dog as he goes here, has informed you of the format, correct?
Yes, he's given me a sense of that. Yeah.
So, do you want to start by introducing yourself to our audience, and then we can move on into our first question? Dr. Bilgrami, I'm having trouble hearing you.
You hear me?
Oh, now
Yeah,
I
we
can.
can
Yep.
hear you.
Now we can.
Okay. So I'm a professor of philosophy at Columbia University. I got my undergraduate degree at Oxford, my PhD at the University of Chicago, and I've been teaching at Columbia University for a while now. And uh, I write both in the philosophy of mind and language, and also in political philosophy and moral philosophy and moral psychology. So I've got slightly schizophrenic interests.
Oh,
What
yeah.
more would you
Uh,
like to know?
Oh, yes. That was a sufficient explanation. So, can we dive into our first question?
Yes, please do.
Wonderful. So, your
Go ahead.
the okay, okay, good. Just gonna make sure my So the first question is actually going to be coming from me. I am a big fan of your work, and I think you have been a very revolutionary figure in the philosophy of mind. And some interpretations of your work seem to suggest that you would hold the position that disembodied minds cannot exist. Are you able to either confirm this or deny this, or give an explanation or further elaboration on this interpretation of your work? Thank you.
Well, uh, uh, cannot exist is perhaps too strong. There's no, uh, if the cannot is a logical cannot, I don't think that's right. But I think there's overwhelming evidence that uh, minds emerge out of a particular uh, evolutionary process in which brains evolve, and the human mind evolves, emerges out of the fact of evolution into a relatively large brain. Now, it's perfectly possible that many of the tasks that the human mind performs can be performed uh, by uh, machines, which we've designed. Uh, and there's this complex question of whether machines of that kind have mentality or not. But, uh, and to the extent that I think we think of these matters, not, we think of the cannot as not a logical cannot, but just on questions uh, uh, of what is possible uh, given the natural facts. It's perfectly plausible to say that unless there's some physical realization of our mental states, they uh, we we can't be said to have mental states.
Okay. Thank you, and I will move on to my next question, which concerns some people have interpreted one of your comments. I can't remember where though. I think it was one of the lectures. So basically, some people have interpreted your work to suggest that traditional conceptions of God, an infallible agent, would devolve into some kind of a mechanism so they wouldn't be an agent. Can you elaborate on that view as to why fallibility, for example, would be required for someone to possess agency, and how this relates to traditional conceptions of divine minds? Thank you.
Well, uh, it is true that there is a sense in which if there's no possibility of a mistake, then we are really dealing with some kind of rational automaton. And, and, and I think it's a very interesting thing to see the divinity as conceived by many believers uh, to be indistinguishable in a way from a rational automaton. Uh, but you know, these things aren't. Uh, it all depends on how you define divinity. I mean, if divinity is defined to be somebody who cannot make a mistake of any kind, then there is a perfectly real sense in which it is indistinguishable from a rational automaton, and in that case, one would have to give it as much mentality as one gives a mechanism of that kind, which is to say, no mentality at all.
All right. Um, Now we're going to move into some text questions that were submitted by the community. So we have a question from Mary Jane. They ask, "What is your view on non-human animal minds? Do you think they have intentional and/or qualitative states? Also, what is your view on Davidson's arguments against them having animal mind or having a mind?"
Well, I think it's perfectly plausible to say that uh, non-human animals have form of elementary mind, even a form of elementary rationality. They are sensitive to certain forms of evidence. Uh, if a dog, uh, a dog may quite properly be said to think that uh, his master has arrived at the door if he hears a noise outside uh, the door, uh, and and the door and the dog may go up to to the door. Uh, as it opens, he might, uh, out of a sense of smell, realize that it is not his master. But I don't think he uh, he has the view, he forms any belief that his previous belief was wrong. He just moves on to a new belief that there is some other person there. But as human beings have the following difference. Uh, they may think somebody's come at the door who is, let's say, I might think my spouse has come to the door if I hear, and when the door opens, I see somebody else, and I not only form the new belief, as the dog does, that it's somebody else, but I also am capable of saying that my previous belief was wrong. That's something the dog can't do. Um, and, and that's the reason I think we differentiate between the sense of intentionality we possess and mentality we possess and those of non human animals. They don't have a way of normatively correcting their their past view by seeing their previous view as wrong. They simply move on to a different view. You can call that correction, but it's not the kind of correction we do. So it doesn't have the same normativity. Nevertheless, it has a much more basic mentality of going from one piece of evidence to another and forming new beliefs. And to that extent, it has some rational sensitivity to the world around it.
Hey, Akeel, this is Jack Angstreich. I'm helping out with this.
Ah,
Um,
Jack, how are you?
all right, how are you? So they just also wanted to know what your view was on Davidson's argument against animal mentality.
Well, I don't think I'm saying anything very different from Davidson. He may not have given this example and put it put it just the way I have. But the real difference, and I think Davidson is pretty much saying this, the real difference is that we are moved by reasons which we see when we take in a reason, we see it to be a reason. We see it as a reason, whereas dogs just respond to evidence or reasons, uh, but they don't see it as a reason for them to do something. So they lack that second order uh, capacity to see a reason as a reason. They just simply respond to reasons without seeing it as a reason.
And would you ascribe phenomenal states to animals?
Certainly, sure. Animals suffer. Animals suffer pain. They enjoy their meals. Um, uh, Certainly, they have qualitative states. But it is wrong to think that just because we have qualitative states and sensory states, and they have sensory states, uh, that they are exactly to be described and characterized in exactly the same way. I think that would be a mistake because a creature who has sensory states but also has the kind of intentionality and sees reasons as reasons, that affects the character of the qualitative states, say pains and so on, that it has. And so it would be wrong to say that pain refers to exactly the same kind of states in both human and non-human animals. The very possession of a sophisticated intentionality in human beings changes the nature of the qualitative states of pain, pleasure, etc., that human beings have.
Okay,
Um,
excellent.
uh,
Let's skip to Luca's question. We can come back to some of the questions we skip if we
Yeah,
run
I was
out
gonna go
later.
look in there.
Yeah. Now
All
this is
right.
something you've addressed in lectures, so at the risk of feeling it's too much. I mean, if you want to just, because some people here aren't very familiar with your work. Somebody wanted to know about why you posit external value properties and whether an internalist about value is unable to explain our mental lives.
I've lost you. I can't hear you.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
I think I've
Can you
lost
hear me?
the voice. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
yeah, we can hear you, Dr. Bilgrami.
Try moving him in and out, maybe.
Can you hear me?
Well,
Yeah, can you hear me?
Okay.
Okay. So somebody wanted to ask about. I mean, 'cause some people here aren't that familiar
Go
with your
ahead.
work, so I
You
know
were
you've
halfway through
addressed.
a question and then I
Yeah,
lost your voice.
yeah. You can you hear me? Can
Yeah, I think Dr. Bilgrami is having trouble hearing us. Doc, can you try moving him in and out
I
once
can
again?
hear you now. I can
Okay,
hear
okay,
you
so you
now.
okay, okay, so you can hear me. Jack, can I go with the other question until you like get to a better microphone?
I don't think the problem is the mic. His mic's
Okay,
not.
maybe. Okay, maybe it's just. Okay, Dr. Bilgrami, if you're having, so you have been one of the leading critics of direct reference theory. Um, do you think that there is any case to be made for direct reference theory, or do you think it's time for philosophers to give up on that particular view?
Well, yes, I've been very critical of direct reference theories because for very traditional reasons, uh, I think that it's absolutely essential uh, to meet uh, Frege's constraint on uh, mind and language, the constraint that is generated by Frege's puzzle, uh, and and that's the Frege's puzzle and Kripke's puzzle relates it to the puzzle is formulated by Frege as a puzzle about language, but Kripke formulates it as a puzzle about belief or mind. And the point of the puzzle is to say that there's an absolutely elementary and fundamental constraint that must be placed on on an agent's beliefs. For instance, let's just stick with beliefs. Uh, in that, uh, so so I have formulated the Fregean demand on mental states and their contents, beliefs and their contents, uh, as follows: if a person is merely ignorant or misinformed, the beliefs ascribed to her should still represent a completely consistent state of affairs. That is to say, the world as she conceives it should be a completely consistent state of affairs. I'll repeat that. If somebody is merely misinformed or ignorant, her beliefs, the beliefs you ascribe to her, should nevertheless represent a completely consistent state of affairs. The world as she conceives of it should be completely consistent. That, I think, is the point of Frege and Kripke's puzzle, because those puzzles are that if somebody fails to know or is not informed correctly that Hesperus is phosphorus, or that Muhammad Ali is gaseous clay, or that water is H2O, etc., just an empirical identity, right? Uh, we don't want it to come out that they are, in some sense, logically irrational. But direct reference theories of language and their counterpart in the uh, philosophy of mind for content and concepts makes it come out that they are logically irrational, but they're not. They're merely misinformed, and we need a basic distinction between those two, and direct reference theories simply cannot meet it. Am I being clear?
Yeah, that's good.
Yes, Dr. Bilgrami, I think. Yeah, so Luca had a question, Professor Bilgrami, as follows. And by the way, Isaac, your mic is terrible, so you have to fix it. Luca is asking, could you briefly summarize what motivates you to posit external value property? Do you think an internalist about value is unable to adequately explain our mental lives? If so, how?
Yeah, I think that's a very, very deep and question with very profound implications. And my view uh, is that you cannot explain our agency, our practical agency, uh, unless you see values as properties in the world around us and not something that we just make up, uh, or as you put it, not something purely internal. So the argument I give in, I think, chapter 5 of my book, Self-Knowledge and Resentment, is that we could not be said to be practical agents unless value properties were in the world. I can give you that argument if you like. It's quite a complex argument, but I introduce considerations of agency, practical agency, uh, to argue that value properties must be in the world. And I don't think internalists, as you call them, about value can account for practical agency.
All right. Well, I don't know if Luca wants you to give that argument so we can find that out. And in the meantime, move to another question because I mean that is available in
Yes.
some of your
Yes.
lectures and things. So go
Yes.
to Dog's
Um.
question.
Okay. So we'll have Dog's question, and then there is one more. So Dog asks, in some of your works, you've mentioned that you hold to moral realism, robust realism. My question in regards to that is, in virtue of what is one perception of a moral fact, what determines who's right in the case of moral disagreement?
Right. So this is a question that is often put to me, in fact, often put to me by Jack. Um, uh, yes, so my stand on this uh, question, this point, has always been uh, the fact that there is differential perception of something does not cancel out the fact that it is perception of something external. If there is differential perception by different people in, say, different cultures or something, or different with different theories of the world or whatever, um, just because there's differential perception doesn't mean that it isn't perception of the world. Even in science, there are differential perceptions. Somebody who's internalized a wave theory of light will see something different in the world than somebody who's internalized a particle theory of light. That doesn't mean that we should become Berkeleian idealists, saying that there's no world and that we don't perceive the world.
I see. Dr. Bilgrami, in modern philosophy of mind, physicalism has been dominant for some time, and you've offered a, so to say, critique of it by presenting your version, so-called Moore-Frege Moore-Pincer argument. Can you go into, well, of course, you won't be able to summarize all of it in such a short time, but the rudimentary and basics of why you think that mind physicalist accounts are fail, and how do you see the future of philosophy of mind in light of your work?
So by physicalist, do you mean the scientific realist view, which is that there is nothing, nothing exists that isn't the subject of natural science? Is that what you mean by physicalism?
Mind
It's
physicalism. Yeah, correct.
And
Mind physicalism.
some type of identity theory about mind and brain.
right. So uh, my view is that Cartesian dualism, that is, that there's a duality of substance, is wrong. Uh, and the reason why it's wrong is that the very idea of substance is an idea. If the mental is a substance like the physical, then the mental and the physical both fall within something that's given to us from the third person point of view. But the real dualism is dualism which says that there is a first person point of view and facts given to the first person point of view, and a different kind of facts given to the third person point of view. That's the dualism, I think, which amounts to the irreducibility of the mental, or the intentional anyway, and the physical. And um, and the reason why that doesn't coincide with Cartesian dualism is that since Descartes thought the mental was a substance, just like the physical, a different substance, but a substance, I think the concept of a substance is the concept of something which can only be characterized from the third person point of view. Now, what is interesting is that Descartes changes his own subject from his early meditations to the later, the fifth and sixth meditations. In the early meditations, he is talking about facts given to the subjective or first person point of view. He then only in the fifth and sixth meditations talks of what is given to the first person point of view as a substance. And I think he spoils the point he makes in the early meditations when he says that. I think the real point about the mental and its irreducibility from the physical is that it is always in the first person point of view or the subjective point of view. And so the irreducibility of the mental to the physical is actually the irreducibility of facts in the first person or subjective point of view with the facts given in the third person point of view, which the natural science studies.
Okay, somebody wanted to know if you could explain what your dissertation, meaning as invariance, was about.
Ah. So that dissertation's main thesis was it was addressing Quine's idea of the indeterminacy of translation, and it argued uh, for, well, it's a very complex view. I can try and state it briefly. Uh, the the idea is that meaning is uh, to put it in a sentence or two, meaning is what is shared, what is invariant between two indeterminate theories of meaning. So what theories of meaning do is assign meanings to terms. And uh, if there are two theories which assign, say, to Jack's language, um, to the terms in Jack's language, two different sets of meanings, right? That's what the indeterminacy of translation of meaning is. I argued that there is something that those two theories are in common capturing, even though they have different ways of presenting the common thing that they're capturing. Now, Donald Davidson presents this with with an analogy with Fahrenheit and centigrade. So Davidson says that Fahrenheit and centigrade assignments of temperature uh, capture the same phenomenon, how cold or how hot it is. So, so you assign 32 degrees, you assign 0 degrees, but they capture the same information. Now, I want to say that there's a very complex uh, invariance of that kind that two different underdetermined or indeterminate theories of meaning uh, capture in their assignments of meaning, say, to all of Jack's terms. And it's uh, uh, it's much more complicated than the standard linear transformation uh, from which goes from Fahrenheit to centigrade, because of the fact that when you assign meanings, you have to assign beliefs as well. Uh, and so what I try and show uh, uh, is that the invariant element is not meaning the it, when Fahrenheit and centigrade capture the temperature, I don't think it's right to say that different theories of meaning capture the meaning that is shared by these two theories or two sets of assignments. Rather, what they share is a complicated phenomenon which we call meaning dash belief. And the dash or the hyphen cannot be removed. So it's meaning dash belief that is shared. And I give a fairly elaborate uh, account of what this predicate meaning dash belief really amounts to, and that's where it gets complex. And so it's really a sophistication and complexification of a basic intuition in Davidson that Fahrenheit and centigrade captures the invariance. Uh, and there must be something invariant when they're indeterminate theories. And I say it can't be as simple as a linear transformation, and I uh, try and provide a more complex invariance.
Yes, Dr. Bilgrami, one text question says that a lot of people actually were surprised to find out you hold to pragmatism, and obviously you will not be able to go a lot deeply into that. But somebody want to, what's the reason that you can probably sum up in like maybe a couple of minutes that you chose pragmatism? Thank you.
Well, uh, you see, the pragmatism I wheel in is only to talk about uh, what is meant by truth when we talk of truth in more or less disquotational terms. Uh, so it's my way of distinguishing the concept of truth as it is conceived in uh, metaphysical realism, as it's called, or in the what Bernard Williams calls the absolute conception of truth and reality in Descartes, and uh, and and I claim that pragmatism has a more satisfactory understanding of the concept of truth uh, because it doesn't rely on metaphysical realist conceptions of uh, a God's eye point of view, but it takes truth to be our concept. Uh, and if truth is our concept, then it must be, when we say that snow is white is true if and only if snow is white, the right hand side uh, use of the expression snow is white is something we assert from our point of view. And uh, and in that sense, whenever we make truth claim, of course we make it from our point of view. What other point of view is there? Uh, but that doesn't mean that truth is in any sense uh, second class, that it is subjective or anything like that. Uh, so, so it's pragmatist in the sense that the idea of our point of view is something that's always in the background, and in the foreground is where we uh, assert truths. Uh, and what we assert when we say that something is true is truth simpliciter. It's not truth from our point of view or anything like that. So you can't say that just because we judge truth from our point of view, what other point of view is there? Uh, just because you say you judge truth from our point of view, it doesn't make truth relative to our point of view, because to be able to say it's relative to our point of view, you have to step out of your point of view and say truth is relative to that. But you can't step out of your point of view. so this pendulum swing in the standard way of talking about truth, that it either must be from some God's eye metaphysical realist point of view, or it must be relativism, I claim is to misunderstand something that the pragmatists understand quite well. Am I being clear?
Yes, yes, thank you so much. And Timber wanted to ask you to clarify. Let's see here. Timber wanted to ask you to clarify if you believe your version of pragmatism better tracks the folk notion of truth. The folk notion of
The what notion of truth?
the
Folk.
folk notion of truth.
The
The
folk
folk
notion.
uh, I think if by the folk notion you mean just what Aristotle said when he said to say of the world, to say some of the world that this is so is true if and only if this is so, right? And that's just what the idea of disquotation captures. Uh, and and I think people, that's the ordinary notion of truth. It's what sometimes is called the deflationary notion of truth and so on. And uh, I don't like this talk of deflation. I don't like this talk of redundancy and deflation because it does seem to me that truth is a value. Uh, I think we want to avoid error and we want to seek truth, as the pragmatists say. And and if truth is normative in that sense, i.e., we want to avoid the opposite of truth and we want the truth, if it's a value in that sense, then it can't just be redundance, right? It can't just be have absolutely no role to play. It has a role to play, a normative role to play. It normatively, we want the truth. And if we want the truth, you're not merely disquoting, but disquoting is reflective of our cognitive norms.
Yes. Do- oh, sorry. Dr.
Well,
Bilgrami,
I think
somebody.
I
Oh,
think
sorry, go
Danny
ahead.
wanted. I think Danny wanted to ask a question. Dog said,
Oh,
if you can unmute Danny, I think maybe he can
oh,
ask.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I be heard?
Yeah, you're
Okay.
audible.
Hey, Dr. Bilgrami. I'm a graduate student at LSU. And well, the first thing is that my ethics professor says that he went to school with you back in, I think it was Bombay at the time. Hussein Sarkar. If you don't remember him, that's
Huh?
fine. But
Yes, yes, I
he
do
said,
remember it.
yeah, he said y'all were very good friends back in the day. So I'm
Yes.
learning from him now. And so when I mentioned some of your work, he was familiar with belief and meaning, and so I was kind of shocked. And then he told me. But yeah, my question is with respect to qualitative states, because it seems like there's this dichotomy between dispositions, mere dispositions, and normative states. But if there are no laws of qualitative states, and if qualitative states are not normative states, then the way that, I guess there are two questions here. The way that we establish them as non-physical or mental as opposed to physical is going to either be by some other argument, or do you think it kind of fits? It's something that could be that sort of claim could be supported in your pincer argument. I guess that's my question.
No, it couldn't be captured in my pincer argument, certainly, because my pincer argument uh, is, well, this is a very interesting question. You see, let me put it this way. Uh, Kripke gives a perfectly good argument uh, about chains and qualitative states and their irreducibility. Now, the way I would put it uh, is to say that uh, if there is a, I mean, if somebody were to say that, so the old view, it's certainly being given up now, but it's the kind of example that Kripke and others had worked with uh, in those early days when they talked about it, when when they talked about pain in terms of C fibers and things like that, which is now I think been completely outmoded by studies in neuroscience. But nevertheless, let's just work with those examples. Um, if somebody identifies, say, pain with some uh, physical state of the brain, uh, then somebody comes along and denies it, right? Uh, okay, so they don't know of an a posteriori identity, like water is H2O, for instance. They're denying an a posteriori identity. Okay, so they don't know enough neurophysiology. Uh, so they're just misinformed about the world, right? Uh, okay, so that means that uh, nevertheless they can be perfectly consistent, but you can't make them consistent unless you give the concept of pain a sense over and above the reference to that particular uh, brain state. And, and so then the question arises, what does the sense express? And here the pincer argument does come in, because if the sense expresses uh, a physical state, then of course you've got a reduction. But sorry, if the sense expresses uh, a non-physical state, then you've got no reduction, and you've granted that pains are irreducible, or sensory states are qualitative states are irreducible. But if you said that uh, pain, the sense of pain or sensory states is physical, then I think uh, a, a question arises about GE Moore, because now you're saying that a mental state of pain uh, is a qualitative state, is defined in terms of uh, a physical state, right? Because it's the sense. If it's a sense, it's a definition. It's not a reference. And if that is so, then if somebody comes and says, uh, I don't think it's that C fiber firing, uh, or I don't think it's that physical. Sorry, I don't think it's that physical state that you've equated the sense with. If he says that, then he's literally saying something like what Moore convicts of the naturalistic fallacy of violating the open question uh, argument that he gives, or the open question criterion that he gives, which is it's like denying that bachelors are unmarried.
But an open question argument to a qualitative state, because if they're not normative, I don't see how there would be an open question there.
Why?
If we're talking about sensory states.
Why not?
Well, the idea of an open question, I mean, I have limited knowledge of Moore, but presumably it's, you're asking the question of whether it should be that way or not.
No. Look, not at all. Look, what is Moore's argument? Moore's argument is, suppose you define, right? So we're talking about senses now. We've gone past the reference stuff, right? We're talking about senses. Okay, so now we're talking about definitions or senses or meanings, not reference. Okay, so if somebody says a sense of pain is some physical state, it expresses some physical states to be equated with some physical state. All right, that means it's defined to be that physical state if it's the sense. Okay, so then it must be like bachelors are unmarried men, right? Because it's defined to be that. All right. Now somebody comes along and says, I don't think it's that. Um, and we want to say, surely he isn't making the same mistake as the guy who says bachelors are not unmarried men. right? If somebody says pains are, so let's forget about denying it. Let's just say he wonders it, right? If somebody says, I felt a pain, I wonder if what I felt is this physical state, right? Now, that's exactly like saying, here is a bachelor, I wonder if he's unmarried.
Right. So I think that my initial view of Moore was it was myopic. You're saying that it's more broad. It could be applied to almost any concept, like the ones you're suggesting. So
Sure,
yeah.
sure. What Moore brings out is the fact that we very intuitively ask questions like, here is a pain, is it this? Just like we ask, here is something good, here is uh, an increase in social aggregate utility, is it good, right? And here is a physical state, is it pain? Well, I think these are very intuitively good questions one could raise, somebody could raise, even if they're empirically wrong, they could raise it, right? But you can't raise that question about bachelors and unmarried men without being in some kind of idiot. So, so that just shows that it can't be a definitional reduction. So, in a sense, it falls to the same pincer.
I
I
appreciate.
think I think this must be what is going on in Kripke. Kripke doesn't spell it out in these ways, right? But I think this must be what's going on in Kripke when he says pains are irreducible.
You're talking about a naming and necessity, right?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, Dr. Bilgrami,
Well,
Yes.
for your response.
We're gonna
I mean,
want to.
I don't have the text with me here, but I think I'm just elaborating what Kripke said. I mean, not perhaps in these explicit terms, but roughly what he said. And what I say about value applies him. So I I link it up with Frege and so on and so forth. So I present a complex thing of it, but and it's slightly ironic because Kripke is very anti-Fregean, but I think Frege is very much part of the dialectic with which I proceed.
In self-knowledge and resentment, where you get when you give the pincer argument, you actually cite a Fregean argument about qualitative states given, I think, by Jack Smart in
Ah,
a footnote.
uh-huh. Could
Because you
be.
say you were preceded in the Fregean strategy by Jack Smart and Stephen White.
Right. Uh, I think that may be
It's
so.
surprising though, because I thought Smart was an identity theorist, so it's kind of interesting that he would give an argument like that, and it goes back, I think, to 1960, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's right. I think um I remember when I was giving some lectures in Canberra at that ANU, Jack Smart was there, and we talked about this at great length, and he pointed out to me where he'd said this, and that's right. Now it's coming back to me. Um, yeah,
Okay. Well,
this is from 15 years
Yeah,
ago, so
wow. Okay.
That's fine.
Now,
Doctor.
go
Oh, sorry.
ahead.
Go ahead, Jack.
Well,
Oh,
I think Isaac wanted to ask a question
oh,
on
okay.
Mike, if
Isaac.
possible, and we want to come back to the pincer argument, I think, because there's been more than one question on that. But I thought just so we can let Isaac in now, and we can come back to that.
sure.
Yeah, cool. That's great. Am I audible, loud and clear?
Yeah.
Your mic's got a little bit of an issue.
Here, I moved away where I can take my mask off. I'm sorry, I'm outside. Can you hear me loud and clear?
Yeah, sounds better now.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, my question is actually about the pincer. I'm posting a formalization in AMA question channel, the text channel, And I just want to know if you take this to be accurate. So this is like very broad strokes. It's not going into what the Moorian and Phrygian arm are. But I could read it off to you.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so premise one would be either your account of value is natural or non-natural. Premise two would be if your account of value is natural, then it requires either analytic or synthetic natural reduction. Premise three would be if your account of value requires analytic natural reduction, then it's susceptible to the Moorian arm of the pincer. And premise four would be if your account of value requires synthetic natural reduction, then it's susceptible to the Phrygian arm of the pincer. And then the conclusion
Correct.
is there. Sorry, were you trying to say something there, or did you want the
That's
conclusion?
correct so far. That's correct.
Okay, and then in conclusion, if your account of value, therefore, if your account of value isn't susceptible to the Moorian and or Phrygian arm of the pincer, your account of value is non-natural.
Good.
Okay, all right, thank you. I appreciate that. I've been wondering if it's accurate, so it's good to get clarification.
Yeah, Dr. Bilgrami, Josh had a question. Do you believe that the more Frege, more pincer argument? Okay, sorry. What? Okay, I didn't. Okay, got it. Do you believe that more Frege, more pincer argument applies to all synthetic identities? And if so, why?
Or why
The,
not?
oh, uh,
In other words, can you apply that strategy to any claim of a synthetic identity? And if not, why not?
well, suppose you ask it of water, right? It's certainly true that somebody can ask without contradicting him, or say without contradicting himself, water is not H2O, or ask, is water H2O, without being foolish in the way that he would be if he said, are bachelors unmarried? Uh, okay, so then you seem to be asking, well, does it mean that water is uh, there is no controversy about water, right? Because we are quite happy to say that whatever sense water has expresses something physical. It fills ponds, it comes out of taps, etc. Right? All this can be physical. All these are physical properties. So
I see. So
there's no controversy about the standard cases of a posterior identities.
But
okay.
it's not a controversy about whether they express physical properties. It's the controversy is whether or not they express something like molecular properties. You know,
Well, yes, it's fair enough. So if it is so it all depends on what your anxiety is. If your anxiety is that there is a sense of water which is not reducible to chemical properties, right? That's fine. You can say that, but uh, but it's naturalism or physicalism doesn't really have to say something which is I mean, after all, you can be a naturalist about something by just saying that these are dispositions which natural science can study. Now, it may be the case that dispositions that natural science studies have categorical properties that underlie the dispositions, right, which are chemical properties. So solubility is a dispositional property, but it has underlying it some categorical properties of some molecular structure, etc., right, of sugar or salt or whatever. But you would still be a naturalist if you said, okay, I don't take a stand on whether all dispositional properties have some underlying micro properties, categorical properties. Uh, Maybe they're irreducibly dispositional properties which don't get realized in or redeemed in something categorial, which is a bunch of micro properties like molecules, or even earlier, going back to early Greeks with the corpuscles of corpuscular theories of early Greeks, Locke and so on. Uh, but you would still be a naturalist because you would say that natural science studies dispositional properties, and it can't always bring them under micro properties or category properties. After all, I think somebody like Nancy Cartwright has that view of dispositional properties that natural science studies. So naturalism is a wider uh, uh, ideology, if you like, philosophical ideology, than uh, the, the, the scientific realism, which posits an ultimate uh, a universe of microparticles, which are the basic properties that fundamental science studies. You don't have to take that view to be a naturalist. You could take that view, some people do, but you don't have to take that view.
But
I'm
is the
against, one sec, I'm against all naturalistic reduction.
but so is the view there that you, if a person doesn't think that water expresses molecular properties when they're talking about water, then is it your view that they're committed to water being ontologically different than molecular properties?
No, look, the reference of water is given by its chemical properties, right? The reference class is
Yeah.
anything that is H2O, right? That's the reference of water according to the standard referential view of natural kinds. That's the reference of water, right? The extension of water. Now, I'm saying that if you apply the Frege part of the pincer and you say, but it must also have a sense, because there are guys who deny that water is H2O and they make perfect rational sense. So you can only make them come out rational if you attribute a Phrygian sense to them over and above a reference, right? That's the Phrygian part of the pincer. And now the question arises, what does the uh, sense of water express? And I'm saying the sense of water standardly is taken to express such things as what Putnam calls the stereotypes, whatever fills the oceans, whatever comes out of taps, etc. Right? And that, I'm saying, is a physical property. Those are all physical properties. And so there isn't a controversy about water in the way there is about value and qualitative states. So I don't get the point of this. Are you going to generalize your view to all a posteriori identities? You know, the point is to bring all this in only because there's a controversy, right? There's no controversy about water. There is a controversy about value and qualitative states. Are they reducible to the states that natural science studies? That's the controversy. There's no controversy about water. So I'm missing the point behind the question.
Um, yes, Dr.
Well,
Bilgrami.
it's supposed to be a kind of reductio. I don't know. Maybe Detroyer wants to come in on this because he.
Yeah,
I
Detroyer,
don't know if
are you able to come
is
on mic?
he.
Yeah, Detroyer's on here, but he's typing, so maybe he's unable to.
Detroyer, do you want to take the mic?
Give me a minute. Yes, yes, he's gonna take a mic in a minute. In the meantime, there was a question. Yeah, Detroit's coming. Detroit, just ping me when you can. And in the meantime, Dr. Bilgrami, a person wanted you to elaborate on our first question. Your belief, well, your view about infallible agency being somehow self-contradictory. What do you believe that means for the philosophy of religion in general? Thank you.
Well, I mean, if you're asking about our concept of God and whether I subscribe to it? Is that what you're asking? I don't know what you mean by
No, no, it
philosophy of
wasn't
religion.
my question. It wasn't my question.
I
The
think the
question was.
idea has got to be something like, it does that sort of pose a problem for philosophy of religion, about the existence of God, if infallible agency is a contradiction?
Well, look, my general view about the existence of God is, first, it depends on how you define God. If you were to define God in the standard sense, i.e., let's say, uh, the agent who created the world in 600 some days a few thousand years ago, right? That's one conception of God. Another conception of God is omnipotent, omniscient, and all good, etc., right? And I'm saying, if you characterize God in one or other of these ways and then ask, do you believe in it? I would say, I believe in things for which I have evidence, or for which there are uh, knocked down logical, philosophical arguments. And I haven't. So let's take the concept of God that created the, the world in 6 days, right? And what is the evidence for it? You have to ask that. I mean, the origins of the universe is a question that we have answers to, right? There's the Big Bang Theory. I mean, it's a scientific question, and creationism gives an unscientific answer to a scientific question, the origins of the universe. So I don't subscribe to God so conceived. I've never no reason to believe that there's any evidence, or for that matter, any argument, convincing argument, that some have tried to give it in the history of philosophy, uh, for for the idea of a first cause, or the idea of all good, all knowing, all powerful God. There's no evidence for any such being, and there's no argument I've seen that's convincing for any such being. So, so I just treat these as questions for which you have evidence and arguments, and I haven't seen one, right? So I think there's actually a lot of reason to not believe it. So I call myself an atheist. But now, if you say God is something that we experience, and some people have experienced it, well, if some people have experienced it, I don't want to be impertinent and say I don't believe you. But the idea of experience there is experience for me, and who am I to deny that that you've experienced something? But the idea of experience there is experience, some kind of mystical state is not something that I could deny. Why would I deny it?
Dr. William, to clarify the question, and by the way, Detroit, if you're here, can you ping? I think I needed to clarify the question. So basically, traditional conceptions of God present him, and I mean by traditionals, I mean traditional Judaism, traditional Christianity, traditional Islam, some versions of Hinduism, present God as a mind that has both agency and possesses infallibility. However, your work has been interpreted to suggest that were such a being to exist, it would be more akin to a, as you put it, rational automaton. So, what
Yes.
implications do you think this view has on the philosophy of religion? Do you think that this can have like significant, um, impact where people have to reinterpret their conception of God? And that was, I think, more what the questioner was asking.
Well, I would want to know, what is the use of the term mind here? What does it mean by saying it is a mind that is infallible? See, the concept of mind is our concept, right? It's our concept. There's no concept of mind so we have to say, what do we mean by mind? And I'm saying that standardly, we do not think of the mind as a mechanism, as an automaton, right? And the only idea we have of somebody who it is not even possible to make a mistake, not even possible to make a mistake, right? Then I don't understand why it isn't just a superlatively reliable mechanism. And that is not our concept of mind.
Okay, can we unmute Timber? Because Timber has a follow up on the more Frigga Moore pincer argument.
Timber wants to be unmuted. He can be. Timber, you there?
Oh, hi, Professor
Uh,
Bilgrami. Can you hear me?
yeah.
Yeah, I just had a couple of clarifying questions. So, at least when you take like in the Moorean open question, do you take analyticity to be how do you take what do you take analyticity to mean? Like something that competent speakers of the language, for example, would find trivial or would be true and like something like that, or do you think deducible from the meanings?
Well, I think uh, analyticity is surfaces in different ways. I mean, I don't deny. I mean, I do make a absolutely firm distinction. So if the only sense in which you could get me to concede that there's something that is captured by the term analyticity is the idea, as I said, that I think it is utterly basic.
So I see. So
That
like, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I think it's utterly basic that you don't want to say of somebody who merely is misinformed about the world that he's a logical fool.
I see. Okay, so then let's consider the following question. Like, given that, let's say y has the property of being equal to 100, does y have the property of being equal to 60 plus 40, for example? Now, this may be a trivial question for us, but let's just suppose, I mean, you could make the example more complicated, like a more complicated mathematical equation, right? But let's just say, would you say that this is kind of a sentence that is open?
Uh, uh, well, it's a lot depends on what you take. Uh, if you have a logicist view of arithmetic, of mathematics, you would see it uh, as a logical claim, and and so you wouldn't. A lot depends on how you view mathematics, and certainly with just a, a smattering of logicism, you would see that as different from um, uh, water is H2O. And uh, now, of course, it's highly controversial what you take mathematics to be. I mean, Kant had this idea of synthetic a priori, and uh, but you would have to have a kind of uh, to see it like bachelors unmarried would actually require more than just logicism. It would require a certain kind of conventionalism. And these are all details about how you interpret mathematics, right? How you interpret uh, statements in arithmetic and so on.
But we could
And
certainly contrast this with a sentence like, given that y is equal to 100, is y equal to 100, right? It seems like at the very least, that would be a closed question, right?
well, bachelors are unmarried isn't the same as bachelors are bachelors.
But you would consider both to be closed, right?
I take meaning questions to be closed, yeah.
Mhm. But
I
it
take
seems
meaning.
like, for example,
Well,
Scott Solms in his book says like he kind of characterizes it as like what would like competent speakers of the language find trivial. So that's sort of what I understand it to be. But the more
well,
like what I was trying to.
but
Sorry, go ahead.
but look, here's the point. When somebody speaks, right? his words to him mean something.
Right.
Right? I mean, if he knows what he's saying, right, then his words to him mean something. Right? And
Yeah.
I'm claiming that if that is so, then whatever they are, whatever that they might mean, right? Whatever they might mean, if they have some meaning, whatever it might be, then there is a closed question. We are here in the region of closed questions.
But my question to you is there a worry in your argument that you may start with what appears to be an open question, and then as you sort of continue to, as you run the more Frege, more Pinsker dialectic, you eventually get to a closed question. So for example, you may start with the question of, given that y has the property of being equal to 100, does y have the property of being equal to 60 plus 40? And that may be an open question. And then you kind of generate a new question, right? Like, given that y has the property of being equal to 99 plus 1, does y have the property of being equal to 61 plus 39? And
okay, but just a sec. Suppose you were to say
Mhm.
that somebody could say doubt or wonder whether when he himself uses the word 100, right? Whether it is 60 plus 40 or not. He could wonder it. But then the word 100 must mean something in his own mind.
right, like maybe he
That's
pictures the number.
that's whatever it is, that's the sense. And now you generate a bachelor equals unmarried man kind of uh, model of an equation, and then you can run your thing with 60/40 if you really think that that is something that is you could raise a Frege style consideration for. But nevertheless, 100 has some sense. That can't be subject to the Frege kind of thing. So
I
if
guess.
you were to say, if you were to wonder if it is 60/40,
Uh-huh.
you've got to answer the question, what is it that you're wondering about? It's not just a bunch of sounds. 100, it means something for you. But that means
Yeah,
there
for example.
is something on the bachelor equals something unmarried man model for that. That's
Right,
all
like,
that Frege is saying.
right. I mean, I think I follow that. But what I'm trying to say is something like, you have a concept of 100, right? And it might be very transparent to you that that's equivalent to the, let's say the property of being equal to 100 is, it's very transparent that it's equal to the property of being equal to 99 plus 1. But now it might be less transparent to you that it's equal to the property of being, it's equal to the property of being equal to 60 plus 40, right? It seems like the idea is that these concepts could be kind of opaque, right? We don't understand, we don't fully
Well,
understand.
what isn't opaque is what isn't opaque, i.e., whatever 100 means for you, right? Some things you may wonder and deny and so on, but you can't even do that unless there's something you don't deny, right? What it means for you. So there's no getting away from the fact that there is something to which the bachelor is unmarried man model applies, for which the question is not open. You can't even raise the point about my doubting or wondering, etc., because what are you doubting and wondering about unless you have something in your mind which is susceptible to being modeled on the bachelor equals unmarried model.
Yeah, maybe it would be better if I just communicate it over. But I'll let other people ask questions.
Is Detroyer here
Yeah.
yet?
Can I ask my
Or
question?
Detroyer, do you want to take? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, Dr. Bilgrami. Nice to have you here. I think I caught a little bit of the conversation that Josh was having with you, and when you were talking about like a water analog. So maybe I didn't quite catch the response, so maybe if I'm repeating stuff that's already been said, point that out. But I kind of had this thought that, look, we have some sense for water to refer to water, which is neutral over whether the referent is a chemical state, right? You know, my notion of water is, you know, a clear, colorless, whatever it fills, lakes, oceans, whatever, is such that what could be that thing, what could be the extension that might have any number of other properties. It might not be chemical. Maybe chemistry is just a huge blunder, right? It's consistent with that. But then, so the idea is that, well, it's clearly not analytic then, that water states are chemical states. And it's also not clear in which sense my sense would express chemical states, except in the sense that it succeeds in referring to them. Clearly doesn't use those terms or concepts. Wouldn't have to, at least. And so the question is, why would a direct analog of your Pincer argument not demonstrate that these water states are not identical with chemical states?
Are not identical with what?
Chemical states.
They are identical with chemical states in the a posteriori sense of identical.
Right. But this, so, but that's what we're supposed to grant. The idea is that why couldn't we run a more Frege Pincer argument on water states and chemical states using these facts, though? The point is that, yes, we agree that the conclusion would be false since there is this a posteriori identity. But it seems to me that all the steps required to make the argument work would be there.
Wait, I'm not getting this. So you don't deny that water is H2O, is an a posteriori identity that is true. Shall we grant that it's a true a posteriori identity?
Right. The whole point is that it's true. That's why I think this example, unless I'm misunderstanding the original argument, the point is that this would sort of undermine the argument. It's like it's proving too much. It would prove that these a posteriori identities, which we take to be true, cannot be true.
Well, I'm not trying to prove a posteriori identity is wrong, and there's nothing I said I'm trying to prove that there is that to make an a posteriori identity amounts to a reduction.
Okay.
That's all I'm doing. I'm trying to say that no notion of a posteriori identity could amount to a reduction of value terms to the terms that natural science study, or qualitative terms to the terms that natural science study. That's all I'm saying.
I get that. It's just the question is, how does that argument run such that it wouldn't also run here?
But how can it run here if the starting point of it is something that I never take back, which is that they are true a posteriori identities? How could I undermine that? I've never what in my argument undermines that? Maybe you should spell out what in my argument undermines something that gets my argument going, and I in no way want to say that I want to deny it. What in my argument turns that down?
Okay, let me. Sure. So if we took your argument, maybe this is a better way to ask the question. If we took your argument and instead of talking about normative properties and natural properties, for example, and if we instead talked about watery properties and chemical properties, which premise would be sort of denied, right? Since we think the conclusion that they're not identical would be false. Somewhere along the line, in proving that watery properties can't be chemical properties, the argument would have to go wrong. Like there'd be some false assumption or premise. I'm just not clear what that would be.
Okay, so water is identical with H2O, so it so in some sense of it is a chemical property, and now somebody comes along and let's say wonders whether it is a chemical property, whether it's H2O, say that particular chemical property.
Sure.
And we want this person to be rational in the logical sense, and so we have to say that water for him must have some sense, right? And now, if the sense, if your question is if the sense expresses another chemical property, right? Not H2O, but some other chemical property, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's say it expresses some other chemical property. Fine. If somebody can't deny that that without falling afoul of GE Moore, right? If he cannot deny it without falling afoul of GE Moore, that's fine.
Right.
Then it's that further chemical property. It's that's okay with me. If that is so, it's perfectly okay with me.
Sorry, you kind of lost me there. If it expresses a further chemical property, that's fine in this case.
If the sense of water expresses a further, it can't be H2O, right? Because
we're granting that it's not analytic.
Yeah, because somebody's wondering or denying that it's H2O, and we've got to make rational sense of him. So in making rational sense of him, we attribute a sense of water to him. Now you ask, what does the sense of water express? And if you say it expresses, what is the answer you give to that? You are giving to that. You're setting up this dialectic. So
yeah.
So what is the answer you give to that? What is the sense of water expressed for the person who's denying it?
Suppose take something like clear, colorless, odorless liquid fills lakes, oceans, rivers on Earth, something like that.
All right, good. So that's the sense of water for him, and so what's the problem? You equate you say that expresses that particular set of physical properties, or what Putnam calls stereotypes, and what's the problem? That's fine with me. It's fine with everybody else.
Yeah, the problem with that is that, well, again, it's still it's not analytic that the sense will refer to, if it refers at all, to chemical properties. Certainly not analytic that it would refer to H2O. And
yes,
so,
it's not analytic. So
the question would be, in which sense does it express those chemical or H2O properties? And if it doesn't, then wouldn't the argument just go to show that it cannot be identical with them? And if it does, then it would be analytic, and we're back on the Moorian.
But wait, you just said that the sense for this guy who's denying or wondering whether water is H2O, for this guy, the sense of water is, let's say, one of those stereotypes, right? It's something which fills ponds, oceans, etc., right? And is clear in appearance, etc., right? You said that's what the sense expresses. Am I right?
Right.
Okay. So now, if that's what the sense expresses, then the reference is H2O, right? The sense is this other thing, and I'm not seeing what the issue is. I don't want to say anything more, as I would if somebody said that of value or qualitative states. I don't want to say anything more about your dialectic. That's the end of the line for me. I accept everything you've said when it comes to water. I will not accept it if you say of value or pain, that the sense of it expresses a a physical property.
But the issue just is that, look, it seemed to me that I could just run the argument though, right? If I'm running some analog of the morphic and more, whatever, and clearly we're not on the Moorian arm since it's not analytic, and then we look at the senses. Does our watery sense express a chemical property? Well, no, in the sense that you can't analyze the sense and see those chemical terms or see that what's picked out must be the chemical stuff. Yes, in the sense that it in fact would refer to something with those properties.
But wait a minute. If for the person if you're attributing with psychological realism, that is really the case, for that person, the term water sense is some chemical property, right? Some other chemical property than H2O. If that's the sense for him, that's fine. Why should anybody be concerned with that?
What,
Look,
I would just
take Mates's puzzle, right? I mean, or take, if somebody says, I wonder if bachelors are bachelors, forget about I wonder if bachelors are unmarried one. If I wonder if bachelors are bachelors, that is something you perfectly well could wonder about, because it might well be the case that the term bachelor is being used with different meanings in the two cases, with different senses.
well, we can just assume, consistent term usage and competent speakers, right? I don't think that's what is the matter here. Like the idea is that, like the sense that he's using, when you say it expresses, I mean, you grant that the sense doesn't express a chemical property, right? I mean, that just could be the case.
What chemical property? I mean, it can't be H2O, right? It has to be some other chemical property.
Why would it have to be a chemical property at all?
Good. I think for most people, the sense of water is not a chemical property.
Right. So that was the whole point, right?
Yes. So if that is the whole point, so let's just say, let's take me, okay? I may be a chemical ignoramus and say, really, is water H2O? And somebody comes along and says, look, Bilgrami doesn't know any chemistry. He's really wondering if water is H2O. He just doesn't know something about the world. But not knowing something about the world still requires that we see him as making perfect, rational, consistent sense. So we've got to attribute a sense of water to him. So you ask Bilgrami, what do you mean by water when you say I wonder if it's H2O? I say, oh, the stuff I just put in a glass that came out of the tap. He says, oh, that's what you mean by water. Okay, good. All right, that's what I mean by water. So now, if somebody wants to say, well, look, that's a physical property, isn't it? That stuff that came, it's something physical. I say yes. It is something physical, and uh, it's something physical in the middle-sized world, uh, and and uh, and that's what I'm saying. You can't say about value and qualitative states. You can't say that they're just some other physical property. You just can't say that of value, but you can say that of water. You can say that of a whole range of other concepts, which you have a posteriori identities. I just am not getting this line of questioning at all.
He's just saying to Troyer
Yeah.
that there's no open question, right? Like the buck stops once you give an account of the sense. You're comfortable with that sense being analytic, right? And
Yes,
he's saying,
yes.
Sense being analytic.
Analytic in the idiolect of Akeel Bilgrami.
yeah,
Analytic, yeah,
What?
right.
yeah, he's
Analytic,
comfortable. Sorry, Bill Gramy.
yeah, analytic in the idiolect of Akeel Bilgrami. So the question is closed. Right there. So what's the problem now?
Wait, so the question becomes closed that the water that you're referring to has chemical properties when you learn something about the world, perhaps. Okay. It doesn't follow from your sense that it has chemical properties. You may even
No,
think, you may even have that sense and refer to water and think that chemistry is entirely incorrect, or may know nothing about chemistry. Presumably that there was a time in which people referred to water that which was the case, right?
you're missing the point.
Okay, go ahead then.
The point is just that if someone gives an account of water that's analytic to the things that comes out of rivers and streams, the thing that from
Mhm.
clouds in the sky, there's no open question. That person is just satisfied with that account. They're not wondering something more, which is not true if you give an account of a value property.
Wait. What they aren't wondering is whether the thing that they're picking out satisfies the descriptions in their sense, right? What some indexical or demonstrative property, perhaps, and those other things. What they might wonder is whether it satisfies other properties, say chemical properties, that are not given or entailed by what's in their sense, right? That's why that it could still be an open question whether the stuff referred to by their sense is chemical or has H2O properties, whatever else. And yeah, I would agree that they could
There's
in principle
always
come
an
to know
open
that the
question.
thing. Okay.
Look, so long as somebody doesn't take H2O to be the sense of water, it's always an open question whether it has chemical properties, whether it is uh, whether water is
H2O or not.
yeah.
Right. And so then we ask, well, why couldn't we just go from there? Okay. Then we look at the senses. Does our water sense express a chemical property? And in one sense, no, it doesn't. In the sense that, look, you can't look at that sense and see that what would be referred to has those chemical properties. But that doesn't commit us to thinking that water is non-chemical. Do you
I mean,
understand
first of all, I
what
don't.
my thought? Okay, go ahead.
No, I don't understand it at all. But the only reason why people brought in chemical properties is because somewhere in the middle of the uh, uh, you know uh, 18th century, um, people discovered something. Right? It was a discovery. It was an a posteriori identity that was discovered.
Yeah, that's not in
So,
contention.
so it was never part of the. When somebody discovered it, they must have had some sense of water about which they discovered this. They must have been, whenever they used the word water, they were talking with some sense about it, right? It wasn't just a sound. So they had
Right.
some meaning to it. And that meaning may have well lasted well after the discovery. So I don't know what do you have in mind when you say that the sense for somebody the sense of water might be expressing a chemical property.
Well, it's not. It doesn't express a chemical property in the sense that um, it doesn't A, use chemical terms or concepts, and B, it's not analytic that what it picks out has chemical properties. It does express a chemical property in another sense that what is referred to, in fact, has chemical properties or is chemical properties. And that distinction um, Thomas Baldwin makes, which you responded to. I think Zach actually wanted to talk about something you said in that response, but maybe we'll get to that at some point.
He grants he grants that the reference is natural for the sake of argument.
Right.
Wait, so are you referring to Tom Baldwin's response to me in self-knowledge and resentment?
Yeah,
In the
correct.
okay. No, but that's got to do with, but that's a slightly different issue. I mean, unless I misunderstand what you're saying, the issue that Tom Baldwin raises is I think falls afoul of a Quinean understanding of what uh,
You say something about it, assuming the falsehood of a Quinean criteria of property existence or ontological commitment or something. Hello?
Maybe his internet cut out. We can't hear
Dr.
you,
Bilgrami.
Dr. Bilgrami.
Are you there, Akeel?
Dr. Bilgrami, your internet connection, well, your connection cut out. We can't hear your voice right now.
You might not be
can
able to hear us.
you hear me?
Oh, we can hear
Yeah,
you.
can
now
now.
we can.
Yeah, now we can.
So sorry, let's go.
You're talking about
Let's go back.
Quinean criterion.
Right. So see, if I remember, when I say that if the senses of these terms express non-naturalistic properties, the game is over for the naturalist. And I seem to remember Baldwin saying, this doesn't follow because there's an ambiguity in the phrase does not express a naturalistic property, right?
Right.
I seem to remember him, I think if I remember, he said, let me see if I can recover what he says.
I
There's
have
an
it here if
ambiguity
you want.
between saying, well, just one moment. If I let me just think it through. Either he says it either means it doesn't express a property in naturalistic terms, or it doesn't express what is, as it happens, a naturalistic property, right?
Right.
And I think, uh, uh, and I think, uh, I don't think that there's such a, you see, I don't think there is that gap because I take for granted that Quine is right in saying that the only criterion there is for a property to exist is that you cannot get rid of it from our concepts, uh, from our terms and concepts which occur in our vocabulary. If you can't get rid of something, if it's ineliminable, which is Quine's favorite word, then it exists. That is, it refers. It exists. And I'm claiming that if I can't get rid of the sense of good or the sense of pain, if I just, it's ineliminable, then you have the properties. It's not just senses, but properties.
Right. But here,
you see, I'm not. I don't understand. I like Quine's idea of property existence, which is that. And I don't understand why Quine doesn't talk of properties. But if he means by properties real properties, I think they're real properties. If you can't get rid of the concept of the sense of good, you know, what is the sense of good? Well, it's the sort of thing we rank. It's the sort of thing we rank and weigh. It's the sort of thing that motivates us to act. These are all senses of good.
right. But the thing is that I don't see why the naturalists would have to give up such a criteria, right? Because they're going to assent to the existence of those properties. What they're not going to assent to is that they're distinct properties from those some corresponding natural property. In the same way that someone is going to assent to the water properties and also to the chemical properties, but they're not going to assent to, or may not have to assent to, them being distinct properties in the sense that they're different things in the world. Yeah, they're different concepts we have, maybe different terms, but they're going to be the same thing in the world.
If they're different concepts, then they exemplify different properties, and they express different properties.
But then you're just going to be having to say something that our water concepts and our chemical concepts are expressing different properties.
Expressing different properties, but they refer, but one can refer to chemical properties. Yeah.
Right, but exactly. So why couldn't the naturalist say, okay, the normative stuff and the properties and the normative concepts and our natural concepts, um, are expressing different concepts, but they refer to the same thing.
They do refer to the same thing. I began by saying that I'm happy to say they refer to the same thing, but they don't express but they have different senses which express different things, and those express real properties. That's why you have a non-reduction.
Wait, but are you
But
saying that the mental and the physical
follow.
co-refer?
I started by saying that I'm happy to buy into the dialectic of a posteriori identities. I'm not taking that back in any of the arguments I've made.
But when you run the more Frege-Moore-Pincer argument in self-knowledge and resentment, I take it that the argument is supposed to be a rejection of naturalism about the mind, right? Sorry, go ahead.
Is that Jack speaking?
Yeah, that's me. Yeah.
Look, Jack, there is nowhere that I would want to deny that there is. I have no desire to deny any a posterior identities that people may genuinely have discovered. If they actually do discover that properties of the mind or value properties refer to natural properties, I have no desire to deny it. But it doesn't amount to a reduction.
Oh, I see. Okay, so there could be co-reference without naturalistic reduction, is what you're saying.
That's right, because that's the point of the Frege arm of the pincer, right? It says there is a sense, and I have a Quinian view of properties, and if the sense is ineliminable, then it is also expressive of a property. So whatever it refers to, what the sense expresses a property, and that can't be a property that natural science studies when it comes to value.
Now, is that the reason why you give an independent argument against Davidson's view later in that chapter? Because Davidson's actually his anomalous monism is a kind of non-reductive account of the mental, at least putatively, right? And so I take it you don't think that the more Frege-Moore-Pincer argument in any way challenges Davidson's view, because he's granting that there's no reduction, right? He's just saying.
I mean, I think Davidson is broadly right in his conclusion. I mean, I've some doubts about some of the premises, but the idea that if there's going to be a materialism, it'll be non-reductive. I certainly agree with that.
I see. So you're just saying that he has the wrong non-reductive account, but you yourself are not. Sorry, you're saying he has the wrong non-reductive account, but you're not actually taking a stand against non-reductive types of physicalism.
Correct.
Okay, that clarifies things a lot. But Dave, Detroyer, if there's more you want to say, go ahead. I didn't mean to take, to
No,
edge you out.
I want to wrap up anyway because I feel like other people have questions and I don't want to take up all the time. But yeah, thanks for discussing some of these issues with me, Akeel, and maybe I'll send an email if we could discuss this further.
Sure.
I think there's more to
By
say.
all means, yeah.
Thank you.
Sure, send me an email.
That was extremely helpful because we've been sort of puzzling over some of this for quite a while now. So that definitely is very helpful. Now, did by the
Do we
way,
let Zach go next?
Akeel, yeah, if Zach wants to go, should we just get an idea about how much time Akeel has? Because I understand that
Yeah, we looked at the 2 hour
Stephen
mark
let it.
here, so
I mean, because if you want to let us know when you want to get going, Akeel, we can try to wrap it up whenever.
Well,
We have lots of
I'll,
questions, so we can keep going. But I mean, I assume you have important things to do, so I just want to be sensitive to your time considerations.
well, let's have a couple of more questions at least. Let's.
Okay. All right. Hey, you can keep me posted.
Godless or Zach?
Let's go with Zach first.
Okay, Zach, go ahead.
you there,
Oh,
Zach?
Zach's not here. Zach's not
Yeah,
even
no,
here.
he's there.
He left.
I'm here.
Oh, all right. So let's get Godless then.
Oh
No,
no,
Zach
Zach
is
is
Zach's
here. Zach
already
is here.
here.
I missed him.
Yeah.
Yeah, Zach, go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Zach.
I have two questions, but I'll start with the first because it's related to the discussion that just happened. So it sounded as if you were willing to allow that you could have co-reference between two different terms, where one is normative, a normative term, and the other is maybe a natural term. But you want to say that that doesn't necessarily entail a reduction. In particular, it doesn't entail that the normative property is reducible. So I was wondering if you
Right.
could say more about what you take reduction to be, because on the face of it, if the one property is essentially a such and such, where the such and such is spelled out in natural terms, and the normative term refers to that, then it would seem that by Leibniz's law, uh, the normative property would similarly be essentially a such and such. And it's hard for me to see how that wouldn't be a reduction. So I'm hoping you can say more about what you mean by reduction.
Well, you have no reduction if there are mental or value properties. I'm saying if there are mental properties or value properties, which then would you agree that if there are mental and value properties, then you have no naturalistic reduction, right? What is a naturalistic reduction? It says there's nothing in nature, there's nothing that is not countenanced by the natural sciences. Okay, natural sciences cannot study values, cannot study value properties.
What I'm not getting is it may be correct that the natural sciences can't study value properties under normative terminology or with normative concepts, but it could be that the very same thing that the natural sciences are studying is also something that we refer to with normative concepts, and that the sciences reveal to us what the
But then you're working with some other definition of another criterion of property existence than Quine. Quine's concept idea of property existence is the idea that if something is ineliminable, if it's an indispensable part of your conceptual repertoire or vocabulary, then there is a property. It's not just a point about language. It's a point about the world. So if you cannot eliminate, right, if these senses express something, they are these properties. Now, Baldwin doesn't accept Quine's idea of property existence, right? Criterion of property existence. That's what it seems to me from what I remember of that. And I'm saying I'm working with a Quinean idea of property existence. I think it's the only honest criterion of property existence. You can't eliminate a concept. Well, that's not just a point about concepts in language. It's a,
That
it has a metaphysical counterpart. There are properties.
Zach, I think I can rephrase your question if you want to let me give it a try.
Yeah, I have
Okay.
one other question, but I can let you give my first question a try before I ask the next one.
So I think the idea is that if the referent that's picked out by the sense, what we mean when we say it, the sense expresses a property and it has this referent, then it sounds like we're saying the referent has a a non-natural property. But if the idea is that the referent is a natural thing, then it sounds like we're saying a natural thing has a non-natural property, which just sounds incoherent.
The term has a referent. The term has a sense. It's only because it has a sense that you can make sense of these guys who wonder or deny an a posteriori identity. So the term has a sense, and the term has a reference. Okay, and I'm saying to say that the term has a sense, and you can't, and the sense is not an eliminable. To say that it has that sense is to say that it's an ineliminable part of that fragment of a language, which is that term. All right. Now I'm saying, what is the criterion of property existence? Anything which is an ineliminable part of our conceptual repertoire, right, is that ineliminability of this is not just a claim about mind and language, it's a claim about reality. There are properties. I'm not a nominalist. They're properties. Okay, if there are properties that are value properties, then I'm not a reductionist. That's all I mean by non-reduction. If you can't get rid of the concept, right? If you just can't get rid of the concept, that means you've acknowledged that there are certain properties which are not reducible to other properties.
Can I just follow up on that? So the bit I'm not getting, so I understand why Aquinas would say that if you can't dispense um, with the concept from your language and thought, then whatever it refers to has to exist.
Mm-hmm.
But why does
no, not whatever it expresses. That's wrong. Not whatever it refers to. What it expresses is a property, a real property.
Right. So sorry. So if we're talking about a predicate, then the thought would be that if you can't eliminate the predicate or the sense of the predicate from your language or thought, then whatever property it seems to express exists.
Whatever property it expresses, it can refer to some. The term can refer to something else, but what the sense expresses is a real property, value property.
So I understand that, but how does it further follow that that if the term or concept can't be eliminated, and as a result that the property that it expresses exists, why does it further follow that that property is irreducible? Because that seems like a further claim than simply a Aquinas view of ontological commitment.
Well, it's a value property, right?
Sure, but that
Okay, that's it. There are value properties. The naturalist says, no, there are no value properties. There are only the properties that natural science studies.
um, Yeah, it may be that we just mean different things by naturalism. That actually kind of leads me to my second question.
I'm very clear about what I mean by naturalism. What I mean by naturalism is just the idea that what the natural sciences study exhaust what nature is or what the world is. Whatever is posited by the natural sciences, whatever properties that are posited by the natural sciences in natural scientific history, that exhausts the furniture of the universe. That's what naturalism is. That's what I'm opposed to.
Okay. So my next question may end up being related to that. So when it comes to physicalism, for example, which some
Hmm.
people understand to be interchangeable with naturalism, but I suppose it depends on who's talking.
No, no, it isn't, because you can be a functionalist who doesn't think everything is redeemed in uh, neural brain states. There are people who think that some dispositions are tendencies. They are not normative. They're tendencies, but they may not have a physical basis. There are people who think that.
Well, I would have understood functionalism to be a kind of non-reductive physicalism. So
No, no, not for me. Functionalism is uh, through and through a naturalism because it takes a third person point of view on all these states. It sees these as all dispositions and causal states through and exhaustively causal states with interrelations. Functionalism is a naturalistic view.
but you want to say it's not a physicalist view.
Need not be.
Need-
Most functionalists want in the end to be physicalists. Right? The function of mixing whatever oxygen with air and so on is realized in the physical contraption carburetor. Right? Most functionalists want to say that, but not all functionalists. Some functionalists are just happy talking about causal states. And I'm saying if you think the mind is nothing but causal, then you're a naturalist.
Okay. Um, so yeah, I'm not quite sure how to ask this question. Basically, what I wanted to know is why couldn't you have a view? I don't know if you would want to call it physicalist, maybe you would want to call it naturalist, but a view that's non-reductive, where you think that normative properties stand in some relation to, for example, what fundamental physics tells us about, but it isn't an identity relation. But nonetheless, it's the kind of relation that will ensure that normative properties are nothing over and above the properties that fundamental physics posits. So I was wondering, do you think the kinds of arguments that you give would also undermine that view, or is that a view?
Certainly. Nothing over and above. Certainly, I would oppose that view.
Okay. So if nothing over and aboveness is compatible with not having a reductive identity statement, then I'm wondering how do you argue against a view like that?
Well, nothing over and above means that we don't have any agency in the practical sense. Look, for me, value properties are basically properties that prompt our practical agency, right? So, if there were, if what you, if, I mean, if you say value properties are nothing over and above properties that the natural science studies, well, properties that the natural science studies are only something you study from a detached, disengaged uh, point of view, not the practical agent's point of view. Okay, so you're proposing a view that we are completely disengaged. The only thing we do is predict and explain. We don't have practical agency. All I can say is, are you serious?
So let me ask one more follow-up question. This will be the last one. So
Mhm.
uh, it sounded like you were assuming that if a property is nothing over and above what nothing over and above the properties countenanced in the natural sciences, then if the properties in the natural sciences can only be studied from a third person perspective, then the property that's supposedly nothing over and above the natural properties also can only be studied from a third person perspective. So my question.
That sounds like a tautology to me. If there's
Uh,
nothing over and above, it follows from that. That's what the phrase "nothing over and above" means.
Well, there are other ways of understanding it. So, like more recently, people have tried to understand it in terms of metaphysical grounding, or to say that some properties are nothing over and above some other properties is to say that the former properties fully ground the instantiation of the other properties. And that doesn't necessarily carry with it any view about how we represent those properties or how we would have to think about them.
Well, but that's what I'm saying is if you take the view that the indispensability of these uh, uh, concepts does not uh, amount to a metaphysical claim about the actually existing properties. And if you want to say, well, it amounts to there being properties, but they're nothing over and above something. I don't know what nothing over and above. It's if you're saying it's like uh, statue is nothing over and above uh, the uh, material, the clay of which it is made. If that's the sort of thing you mean, well, I'm saying that doesn't capture what I mean by nothing over and above. What I mean by nothing over and above is that it's not that it's. I mean, that sounds like a sophisticated claim about identity with the stuff or the matter or the clay from which it is made. But a statue can have a sense which it goes beyond that. So it is over and above that. Uh, if if you take the Quinian view of property existence seriously, that uh, if the statue has a meaning or a significance, a sense, and so on, uh, which doesn't include the clay, but over and above that, then it is over and above the clay. So I don't know what you mean by nothing over and above. You'd have to explain to me. Do you mean it to be in the sense that people talk about the relationship between the sculpture and the clay and so on? These are, it all depends on how you spell it out.
Well,
But I would say that uh, the whole point of sense is that it goes beyond those kinds of uh, things. The sense of it will always surpass, outrun uh, these things that it's supposed to be in your use of the term uh, nothing over and above.
so
Sense will outrun whatever it is that you are claiming is it's not nothing over and above.
so, so let me sorry, one last question about the statue and clay example, because I think that might actually be really helpful.
Mm.
So some people want to say that that a statue isn't going to be identical to a lump of clay, given that they have different modal properties. So, for
Hmm.
example, you could chop off the arm of the statue. That would arguably destroy the lump of clay, but the statue
Hmm.
would remain in existence. Similarly, you might have thought that the very same statue could have been made from a slightly different lump, stuff like that. So they want to say that there isn't an identity between the statue and the lump of clay. There's some other relation.
Hmm.
Sometimes they'll call it constitution.
Yeah,
So my
sure.
so it sounds like you want to say that there being a constitution relation between the statue and the lump of clay, that would not ensure that the statue is nothing over and above the lump of clay. In fact, the statue would be over and above the lump of clay. Am I correct? And
Absolutely correct. Yes.
so So do you think if someone held that the statue is something over and above the lump of clay in that sense, in the sense that you use it, that they couldn't be a naturalist? Because presumably the statue then is going to be over and above the lump of clay, which is the thing that the sciences presumably study. So would that mean that naturalism?
Well, no, I mean, it all depends on what your meaning of the word statue is. Look, if it's like water, if it's like water, then, you know, its sense could express a purely physical property. My point is that all these metaphysical sophistications about constitution, uh, uh, grounding, and so on, that you have to run them through the Frege mill. You have to run them through the Frege arm of the pincer. If you run them through the Frege arm of the pincer and you get somebody denying things, you get somebody wondering things without running afoul of more, right? I mean, and it seems intuitively like an open question. Whether it be constitution, whether it be grounding, whether it be uh, 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 a posterior identity, I don't care what the theory is, right? If you can run it through the Frege mill and the senses are needed to make rational sense of the person who wonders, denies, etc., then you've got the arm going, the more arm waiting to be, more arm of the pincer waiting to work. That's it. So if you can wheel in any view you like, constitution, grounding, whatever you like. The crucial bit of the argument is, does the Frege arm kick in? And if the Frege arm kicks in, then the more, and you know, it doesn't matter. I mean, I don't think there are many things that are irreducible to the properties that natural science studies. But I reckon things like intentional properties, value properties, and maybe qualitative states are like that.
Okay.
So whenever you're tempted to ask, whenever you're tempted to bring in these sophistications in metaphysics to the a posterior identity view, you just have to ask yourself, does the Frege arm of the pincer run or not?
All right. Thanks so much for answering my questions. I won't ask any follow-ups so that other people have an opportunity.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Okay. I better go and fix some supper for.
Thank you,
Oh.
Akeel. Maybe we can do this again sometime if it was not too unpleasant for you.
No, it was very pleasant, and I enjoyed it a lot. I have to do another AMA. Somebody's asked me. I think it's sometime next month.
Oh, can you
But
send me the information on? And actually, also, you were going to send me any other talks you're doing, because I think the last one that I knew about was that one like a week or two ago. So I don't know if there's any else, if there are any others coming up this semester.
Yeah, I'll just drop me a note reminding me.
I will. Okay.
Dr. Bilgrami, just to be clear, the best way to contact you is through your email, correct?
Yes, that's right.
Thank you so much once again, Professor Bilgrami.
Sure.
Thank you for coming.
Sure.
Thank you so much for coming here. Thank you for so much. We hope that we didn't bore you. Your answers were very on point, very comprehensive, and you know, just once again, thank you so much.
Sure.
Okay.
Bye.